This is the Tabernacle podcast with me, John Vermilia, and two guests who aren't normally on this podcast. To my right, one of the stepbrothers.
What's up, John?
What's up, Adam?
The better of the stepbrothers.
Oh, the better of the stepbrothers?
Yes. Yeah.
Better than Britton Bishop?
By a lot, yes.
By a lot.
Yeah.
Normally, Britton Bishop is sitting in this chair.
Yeah. Is this weird for you?
It is, because I felt like David putting on Saul's armor when I put on his headphone. He has a massive head.
He does.
I have a massive head. Ask any of my children. I have a
You
massive
think he has
head.
to pay extra for hats?
Does he?
I don't know. Just
They're
wondering.
giant XL.
Maybe.
Well, Adam Sharp, student ministries pastor,
Yes, sir.
Buckley campus, overall godly man. Love this guy. And I am super excited because across from me, we have someone brand new to the podcast. She is our Tab Kids director in Buckley. Her name is Isabel Crawford.
Hello.
Isabel Crawford. Hello, good to see you. Formerly Isabel Vermilia.
Yes.
How in
Formerly.
the world did you get on this podcast?
I have no idea. I don't know why I said yes.
You're welcome.
Was it any sort of arm twisting by me?
No, mostly Adam.
Mostly
What?
Adam.
Yeah.
You just happen to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
Right place at the right time.
Uh-huh.
Well, Britain
That's
is,
how this happens.
It is. If you're hanging around on a Thursday, you never know when you're going to have headphones on.
I was warned about that.
Yeah,
That if I
were you
worked on
really?
Thursdays, I would probably end up on a podcast. So
Yeah. Well, if you don't know, Isabel is Darcy and I's oldest child. She is an adult woman. She is a wife, a mother, a godly woman. I couldn't be more proud of her. And she's also working with and for Adam in our next gen here at the Buckley campus. And what we thought we would do with Britton away, well, actually, this is what Britton told us we had to do.
Mhm.
Well, he's kind of a slave driver
He
when
is.
it comes to this. But
Yeah.
he wants us to continue in our study of 1 John, and we thought it would be cool to have a woman's perspective. And so that's why Adam did the arm twisting, and I just sat over here and was like, hey, whatever, it's all good. So thank you so much for being with us, Belle. And Adam,
Sure.
thanks for being with us again.
Of course.
This is good. So let's jump right in. We're going to do this as we do with Tab Women, the same way we do with Fight Club, the same way we do with Young Adult. I believe you're in the Young Adult group that Adam leads here in Buckley.
yeah, and we just went through this actually, so it's fresh.
Perfect. So in that regard, I expect both of you to pretty much carry me right now because I need a new spine.
Bell's got you.
I'm struggling. I'm in pain. I got my pillows. I'm on a muscle relaxer. We don't know what's going to come out. I'm trying to offset the muscle relaxer with
Oh,
an
boy.
energy drink.
I don't think that works.
No,
that
that's
way.
how it works.
We're just going to trust God and take the risk here, people, right?
All right.
So we're in 1 John. We left off at the end of chapter 2, and so I will go ahead and read the first couple verses here. 1 John chapter 3, this is where we are. It says, "See what kind of love the Father has given to us that we should be called children of God. And so we are. The reason why the world does not know us is that it did not know him. Beloved, we are God's children now, and what we will be has not yet appeared. But we know that when he appears, we shall be like him, because we shall see him as he is. And everyone who thus hopes in him purifies himself as he is pure." So we're going to follow that whole thing with what's it say and what's it mean. The very first thing right out of the gates is see what kind of love the Father's given to us. We should be called the children of God, and so we are. What's it mean that we're children of God? Somebody got a thought there? What's that mean
Yeah.
to you?
Everyone who believes in Jesus, everyone who's got a saving faith is a child of God.
But I thought all the people of the world aren't we all God's children? We are the world. Sorry, no singing on this podcast, right? Remember that? We Are the World in the 80s? No, neither of you were born because I was only 15, 16 years old,
I was
right?
born in the 80s, but
Yeah, but you were too
Not-
little to remember, right?
Yeah.
Aren't we all God's children? I mean, isn't that a common held belief in the world that we're all God's children? This seems to contradict that.
yeah, that is something that is commonly thought. But this does seem to contradict it. Yeah.
Belle, what do you think about this? That we are the children of God. What does it mean that we're the children of God?
Well, I think here he's speaking to the children of God, not necessarily every human on earth. And I think it's something that's available to everybody, but just that once you're in, you're in. And I think that's why it's really clear that that we're his children. It's not just gonna, dissipate at a mistake or something like that.
Right. I got a note here that says it's God's great love that takes the initiative to make us the children of God. And it's an extravagant outpouring of our Heavenly Father's love that made the Apostle John marvel, see what great love the Father has lavished that we should be called children of God, and that is what we are. I mean, that's a big deal to think that you are not just loved by God or known by God or a person of God, a person who goes to church, but you're a child of God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It reminds me of Ephesians 1, where it says that we're adopted, right? When it basically lays out who you are in Jesus, and adoption, being adopted, is one of those things. And so becoming a child of God when you are a Christian, and there are huge implications in that. And I do love, I was just thinking that when you read that note of, he seems to write this in a way of, in an aspect of wonder and like amazement of, man, how great a love is that we get to be children of God. There's a sense of amazement here.
Right.
And so I wonder for me what it would look like, and I'm just going to start diving in right now, but
go for it.
What would it look like for me if I were to live in that amazement every day? The amazement of just recognizing that I'm a child of God because of his great love. It's nothing that I can do to make me a child of God, but it all began with his love. And so, like, what kind of confidence would I walk with? And I'm not saying an arrogance, but a confidence of who I am. And so when life throws things at me and life happens, remembering that I'm a child of God and there's an amazing love behind that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. You had a thought?
I was just thinking, being a new parent, the same type of thing, because I've heard it my whole life, but when you actually have a child and you're like, if they ever did anything, you would never just be done with them. It never. And so it's just that, wow. And then it's just like you're just amazed all over. So living that way makes everything different. Yeah.
You mean if they ever did anything like sin?
Yeah. If
like
they
really
sinned,
bad.
if they ditched it, there's literally nothing that would make you stop loving them. So, but yeah, living that way makes everything different.
So, just to put it in context here, I don't mean to brag, but Isabel was our first child, and she was probably the most perfect. Don't listen to that, Benji. But she was probably the most perfect because we had the most energy, we were reading the most books, we were the most stressed out, and all that kind of stuff. But I remember when you were born, my whole view of God,
It changes,
yeah. And it went deeper. It went to a place where before I had children, being called a child of God meant,
oh, cool.
Okay,
yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, it was nice. It wasn't that great. And you're a parent as well of two sons. After becoming a parent, it went to a whole nother level. And so the brag part is, have you met my grandchild?
Oh my gosh.
Avie Grace. Yes.
She's
so
the cutest.
this is the fruit of Isabel and Jacob's union. And she's perfect.
And this is why she didn't want to come on the podcast.
This is why she didn't want to come on the podcast. I was so tired and I was in so much pain yesterday because I'm still complaining. Old Man River here, the sciatic, whatever. My spine hates me. That's all you need to know. And I've been grumpy for a couple of days. And I was in, had the legs propped up. I'm on the master bed. And little Avie comes in for a visit. Now, Isabel's there. Jacob's playing games with Benji in the basement, doing all this kind of stuff. And she looks at me with those big browns and is like, "Oh, go outside." I'm like, "Oh, baby, I think it's going to rain in a minute. I would go outside, And I'm sitting there going, "What? You want some jelly beans?" I know what she wants. She wants me to get up off the bed and take her outside for some quality Avie and pop-up time, right? She said, "I'll go outside." And I'm like, where's your mommy at? We'll go outside. And it's like, "What did you do today?" And she told me, and then we'll go outside. And it was just persistent.
Yeah.
It was persistent.
So did you go outside?
Yes.
Good.
We went outside. We crawled around in the playhouse thing and then swung. I need Britton here for all my tenses. We swung on the swings.
Yeah.
And
Something
then,
like
but it's that parent-child relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And you said what it would be like to live in that reality every day of that unconditional love, that adoption. Something you shared just a couple weeks ago when you preached, you were talking about the fact that in Jewish culture, a natural-born child could be, and I can't understand this, but could be disowned by a father.
Yeah.
But not an adopted son.
Right.
And we've been adopted.
Mm-hmm.
And it just took it to a whole nother level.
Yeah.
You want to go outside?
What's interesting, like you guys bringing that up with, and I agree, when I had my first child, it's like, man, like feeling a love that you've never felt before,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's just a whole different aspect of love. My children have also the flip side of that. So like they've helped me understand my own wickedness and how patient God is with me,
Yeah.
because I get frustrated quickly with my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it will oftentimes make me think about that. Like, I'm a child of God, and how often do I frustrate him?
Yeah.
Yeah, he loves me just the same.
Right.
Right. And so there's both aspects of that, right? Like they can help us see just that incredible love. And they also can help me see how jacked up I am and make me, again, like, just want to apologize to God. Like, I'm sorry. I know I frustrate you way more than my kids frustrate me. But yet your love never changes. It's still a love that I can't imagine.
I don't know what's the matter with your kids, because Avie never frustrates Isabel.
Yeah, I'm sure.
She's
Yeah.
perfection.
Right.
Have you ever been frustrated with her? You know,
Yes.
I'm kidding. Yeah. When do you get frustrated? Like, give me an example.
I don't know. She's a toddler. She's 2. So there's she's got her own will right now. And she just doesn't always want to do things that we need to do, or, so you do get frustrated, but then I don't know. I try to make it a habit of apologizing to her when I lose my patience. And it's not like natural, but I think that's important to her. And even me saying out loud when I'm sorry, I lost my temper, makes me realize I'm a flawed parent and God is not a flawed parent.
Right. So have you seen her little sin nature yet?
Yes. Yes, I have.
I have not seen it.
Oh.
I have heard her tell Mammy, stop it.
Yeah.
Don't touch the iPad. And we're like, okay, because we're grandparents. It's a little bit different.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different. But back to the book here. It says, see what kind of love the Father's given to us. We should be called children of God, and so we are. And Adam, you were saying, what would it look like if we lived with that sort of gratitude every single day? Like we really just relished in the fact that there's unconditional love from the Father towards us. He goes on to say, the reason why the world does not know us is that it did not know him. And so there is a built-in like friction between us and the world. And he doesn't shy away from that at all. Even though there's those in the world that would be like, oh, we're all the children of God. There's really, to my knowledge, no other world religion that refers to themselves as God's children. There might be some in the kind of the animistic or ritualistic kind of indigenous peoples religions, but as far as major religions in the world, we're the only one that calls ourselves the children of God because he called us the children of God first. But he's speaking to this friction that is between the world and us. The reason the world doesn't know us, it did not know him. Thoughts about that, Fight Club style?
Yeah, when I initially read that, like, it just made me think about how, like, as Christians, our lifestyle is supposed to be different, right? What we do and our convictions are not going to make sense to the world oftentimes. And so I told Isabel yesterday if she came on, we'd get to talk about aliens on the podcast.
Yeah, aliens.
And this is exactly
like,
what I was
what?
referring to, because we're aliens, we don't belong here, or this is not our home, right? And so, but it got me thinking about how it's a lifestyle thing, part of it at least, of we don't belong here because we live a different way than the rest of the world. And if we're not,
then something's wrong.
then something is wrong.
There's something wrong,
You know?
right?
Um,
Do you notice how Christians are always so surprised about the friction?
Yeah.
Like they're so easily surprised that, well, why would the world think that? Or why does the world look at us in this way? When, you use that phrase that we are strangers and aliens.
Mhm.
I mean, I think it says that in the scripture. Why do you think we as Christians get so surprised when that happens? Well, you got any thoughts?
Well, I just think we forget because we were told that we would be hated for Christ's sake. So I forget it all the time. So I would just say, like Heidi says, that we have built-in forgetters.
Built-in forgetters.
Yep.
In 1 Peter, I think it is.
Yeah.
I
think it's 1:1 right at the beginning.
You got it? No, I'm looking at it actually in 1 Peter 2:10, but read the one you were referring to.
Well,
Go for it.
I don't have it yet.
Oh, you don't have it. Okay, so it says in 1 Peter 2:10, I'm reading from the NLT, once you were not a people, but now you're God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles to abstain from the passions of the flesh which wage war against your soul. Keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, so that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day of visitation. So you're right. We're warned again and again that this world is not our home, that we're strangers and aliens here, and we are the children of God. Now, there's a flip side to that. There's people in the world that look at us like we think we're kind of full of ourselves. Mm-hmm. Oh, you're pretty full of yourself. You think you're a child of God and I'm not? I've been to funerals where there was no Christian anything, and, someone's gotten up there to do some sort of a eulogy, and it's like, well, we're all God's children. Or, you're watching an award show.
Yeah.
Every nation, we're all God's creation.
Mm-hmm.
But the Bible doesn't imply, and this sounds hateful, I might get canceled for this, the Bible doesn't say that we're all God's children. We're not all God's children. There's only one way to be known as one of God's children, and that is through faith in Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and it sounds harsh because it can seem exclusive, but in the reality, it's inclusive because anybody can choose to be a child of God.
Yes, yes.
Right. It's that.
Flesh this out.
Faith.
I like it.
Well, it's having that faith. Like if I decide to follow Jesus, well, then I become a child of God when I have that faith in Jesus.
Right.
And so it's not exclusive saying no, you guys don't get to be. It's just that we've
made the choice.
Yeah.
Right. Here it says on this website, a note here, it says, we become God's child through faith in Jesus Christ, which results in spiritual rebirth. And then it quotes John 1:12-13. To all who believed in him and accepted him, he gave the right to become children of God. They are reborn not with a physical birth resulting from human passion or plan, but a birth that comes from God. And so Jesus taught that only the children of God experience this new birth, and we're birthed into God's family. And that's the difference between us and the world. And as we read in 1 Peter, the difference is stark. The difference is that we are like, it said here, sojourners and exiles.
Yeah.
I think what I read, way back in the day in the NIV, it was strangers and aliens, so we're on the alien side of things. And so in verse 2, it says, Beloved, we are God's children now. It establishes this fact. And what we will be has not yet appeared. But we know that when he appears, we shall be like him, because we shall see him as he is. And everyone who thus hopes in him purifies himself as he is pure. And so it says we are children of God now, but what we're going to be isn't been established yet. At least in the ESV, it says it has not yet appeared. What do you think he's talking about there?
Yeah, this was one that I read a bunch of times yesterday, and I was just talking with Isaac and MJ upstairs about, because this is, I feel like this verse can be confusing in a couple of different ways. One where it says we will be like him. We will not be God. We will not be a God.
But we'll be like him.
But we'll be like him. So I wonder, like, as I read this, it's like we have not seen God in all his perfection, right? And so when we see him, we will see him in his perfection, and then that will be reflected onto us. And so maybe we'll see ourselves as though God sees us at that time.
That's a good thought.
And so, like,
I've never thought about that before.
all of the things that it says in Ephesians of who we are,
Yeah.
it's hard for me, at least, to look at myself and go, yep, I'm blameless, I'm chosen, I'm adopted, I'm lavished in grace, I'm all of those things. Because when I look in the mirror, I don't see that. I see the
All the
junk
ways
that
I messed
happens
up.
in my
Yeah.
head,
Yeah.
right? And so, and maybe I'm way off on this, but I just wonder if this is, like, when we see him and we see his perfection, that maybe that reflection will then look at us and we'll begin to see ourselves as how God sees us. Because we are children of God now.
Yeah, and
right?
you'd think you would have to, because if you see the glorified Christ, the one who made us, that's going to reflect how you see yourself. Like, wow, you made me. That just changes everything.
Yeah, and our nature will be more like him when we're with him. So,
right. So
talking the sin nature and stuff like that.
It says, I'm trying to remember that passage. I think it's in. I want to say it's in Colossians. Isabel made me think about that. Well, you both did, actually. Is it Colossians where it says that we with unveiled face will see him speaking about reflecting his glory? Oh, no, it's in 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 18. It says, now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And we all, with unveiled face, beholding the glory of God, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. And so this is kind of referring to Moses back in the day.
I was just thinking about that. Is it when he goes to talk to God and he comes back and his face is glowing and the people can't look at him? That's what I was thinking about.
Yes.
It's very literal, but if that happened, then I just can't imagine what it's going to be like when we actually see him at the end.
Right. Moses came down from being in the presence of God and his face shone.
Yeah.
And it was such a distraction to the Israelites. This is from the book of Exodus, that they had to put a veil on his face.
Yeah.
And what Paul is referring to in 2 Corinthians, he's talking about in verse 16 of chapter 3, when one turns to the Lord, the veil is removed. Now the Lord is the Spirit. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And we all, with unveiled faces, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. So that speaks about, in this life, that sanctification process of becoming more and more and more like Christ. Back to our original text, I think you're exactly right, that this could be related to the fact that we see the glorified Jesus for the very first time. We see him in all of his glory. Mm-hmm. Now, there was a moment, because I have a note here in the ESV on verse 2, when it says what we will be. It says, beloved, we are now God's children now, and what we will be is not yet appeared. But we know when he appears, we shall be like him, because we shall see him as he is. When it says see him as he is, he's talking about him in his glory. What we will be means having glorified bodies that will never be sick or grow old or die, and being completely without sin. And this says, no one like that has yet appeared on earth except Christ himself after his resurrection. But we will be like him. And so in eternity, Christians will be morally without sin, intellectually without falsehood or error, physically without weakness or imperfections. Oh, praise God, I'm getting a new spine, right? And filled continually with the Holy Spirit. But like does not mean identical to, and believers will never be omniscient or omnipotent as Christ is, since he is both man and God. So the closest thing we're going to be to that is the glorified Jesus, who after his resurrection walked the earth for 40 days, taught his disciples before his ascension. They saw him, and during that time, this is where scholars come up with some of the interesting ideas about what our glorified bodies will be like. So for example, can you remember Jesus walking with the two bros on the way to Emmaus? Do you guys remember that story?
Yeah.
This is after the resurrection. And then they stop for dinner, and one of them is like, oh, or please stay with us. And he was going to go on. They didn't know it was Jesus yet.
Yeah.
And then, so he stayed for dinner. And it says, then they gave him the seat of honor and asked him if he would bless the food. And then Jesus blesses the food. and suddenly their eyes were open that it was him.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to Jesus?
He disappeared.
Gone.
He disappeared.
Yeah.
So if we're going to be like him, do we have that power
Yeah.
to just be like, here I am,
Now I'm gone.
here I'm not,
Yeah.
right? Or when they were in the upper room, like the next account in the Gospels talks about, they were all in the upper room, the room was locked, and they were like, we saw the risen Jesus, we saw the risen Jesus. And Thomas is like, I'll never believe it, not until I see the wounds in his hands and put my
Side.
hand in his side.
Yep.
And suddenly, he was among them.
Yeah.
So he could teleport through walls. I want that power. But he wasn't a ghost either.
Yeah.
No.
He wasn't a ghost. How do we know he wasn't like just some kind of a spiritual
Well,
ghost?
he ate.
He ate
Yeah.
fish. Yeah.
Mhm.
Because they were freaked out, thought he was a ghost, and he said, give me some fish to demonstrate.
They also didn't think anything was weird.
Yeah.
They didn't think anything was weird until they realized it was him. So obviously he just still looked like a dude.
He looked like
Yeah.
a dude.
Yeah.
And apparently we're going to be eating food in our glorified bodies. Because if
Thank
he ate
goodness.
fish,
Yes.
I mean, I'll probably choose steak, but,
Yes,
that's
please.
just...
I hope there's wings.
But according to this, that's what John is referring to.
Mm-hmm.
What we will be is not yet appeared. We don't have any full concept of that, but we know that when he appears, we will be like him
Mm-hmm.
because we shall see him as he is, and everyone who thus hopes in him. And this is verse 3. So all of that is nice. Like if I was, totally at a Fight Club table with a bunch of guys and they wanted to take the next 15 minutes talking about their glorified superpowers, I would be like, no, wait. All that's speculation. Your Honor, speculation.
Mm-hmm.
Look at verse 3. Verse 3 is the main thing and the plain thing. And everyone who thus hopes in him purifies himself as he is pure. What does that mean? If that's because there's no speculation about that. The hope in who?
Jesus
The hope in Jesus,
Yeah.
right? And what does it say to do?
purifies himself.
Oh, how do I do that?
So this is the NASB. It says, and everyone who has this hope fixed on him
Mine says set. The
purifies himself just as he is pure.
2020, yeah, set on him.
Set on him.
Yeah, makes me think of it's a really cheesy analogy, but the compass. So if we're aiming at him,
Mhm.
the purification comes from that, not from
Oh,
anything
that's
we
not
try
cheesy
to
at
do.
all.
Yeah.
That's not cheesy. Why would you say that's cheesy?
I don't know.
Did you think that was cheesy?
Nope.
Have you ever had to use a compass
Yes.
in your military experience
Yes.
for orienteering?
Orienteering.
Or whatever it is,
What was that word?
mountaineering.
I don't-
Orienteering, that's a
Okay.
real word. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
It's-
land navigation.
Land
is a
nav.
much easier way to put it.
Yeah.
But yes.
Land nav.
Yeah.
So Isabel just brought up a great analogy about if my hope is set, if I've set the compass heading to that point,
Yeah.
what happens after that? Is it a straight shot from here to that compass point?
Not typically.
So how do
You-
I get there?
you-
Mr. Land Navigation.
Well, you've got azimuths and stuff like that, but we're not going to discuss all
Oh, we're not?
shooting an azimuth and all that. But what makes I love that analogy because if you're using the compass
hmm
and it's off even a little bit,
It starts to.
that little bit makes
Uh-huh.
you further and further away from your destination.
hmm
And so even being just a little bit off, because what is sin? Missing the mark, right? Whether
Right.
you miss it a little or a lot, you've missed the mark.
Yeah.
And so if that is not set, if we're not fixed on him, even by just a little bit, that's the sin or whatever it is has potential to pull you further and further away from him.
hmm
So I think that's a great analogy. I really like that.
Yeah.
And there are going to be obstacles, right?
There's going to be
There's-
obstacles.
and that's, I think, what you were alluding to.
Yes.
Well, it's not always going to be just a straight line. There's going to be obstacles. There's going to be ups and downs and bumps and bruises and things are going to happen. But we always go back to what is the point that I'm going for?
Right.
And there's times in land nav or in life where you've got to reevaluate and go, yep, I need to fix my eyes on
Mhm.
where I'm going. Right. I've got to readjust this compass and
Right.
get fixed on it again and start going. And we can find ourselves there a lot. And sometimes we start just little by little, right? The compass gets off a little bit, we keep going, and then we realize we're way off track.
hmm
And I think that's how the enemy wants it, man.
Yes.
It's little by little.
And I think one of the things that the enemy does, and I hope people haven't checked out yet on this little thing, because you both have touched on something really important, I think, is we get this idea, like I think Christians tend to want perfection or expect perfection of themselves. So they assume I've been forgiven and I'm so grateful to God and I'm a child of God and I've been adopted and I'm lavish and God loves me even more than I love my little grandchild or my little child that, I'm a new parent, like Isabel said. And then all of a sudden, we get off that heading just a little bit and we assume, well, I just must be lost or I must not be a Christian. And if you look in these next few verses, it says in verse 4, here's a new thought he introduces here. Everyone who makes a practice of sinning also practices lawlessness. Sin is lawlessness. You know that he appeared to take away sin, and in him there is no sin. No one who abides in him keeps on sinning. No one who keeps on sinning has either seen him or known him. Now, right there, people can start to think, if I ever sin, I must not be a Christian. Just the wording of that. Is that the same that yours says? Or are you in the CSB or the ESV?
The
It's pretty close.
Yeah, is it NASB?
Yep.
Is the most, and that one says continually, sins continually.
Sins
Mine
continually.
Yeah, it says no one who remains in him sins continually. No one who sins continually has seen him or knows him.
Right. And this one talks about the practice of sinning.
Yeah.
So it's a similar idea. Everyone who makes a practice of sinning also practices lawlessness. So I looked up, what does lawlessness mean? It says...
Like a rebellion?
Yeah, it's like a rebellion. This one here says the word translated lawlessness from the Greek, it's anomia, which means an utter disregard for God and his laws. That's different from...
I messed up. I didn't know that was wrong,
or I hold this in high regard, but I just keep breaking that law all the time. Listen, Michigan, I hold in high regard the speed limit laws of this nation, but I just gotta keep breaking them, right? Does that make me a lawless person? No, because I try to follow them to the best of my ability when I'm not in a complete rush. But it's easy to break that law. Now, I want to regard God's law even higher than that. This says the follower of God will avoid lawlessness at all costs. And it says those who pursue or persist in lawlessness will not inherit the kingdom of God. So there's a difference between sinning once in a while and making a practice or continually, I think is what we're established.
Yeah, that practice is, it seems to me like it's a habitual sin, right? Because if you practice something that's, like, do you want to get good at something, you practice it, right?
Oh.
There's an intent there. You're going to continue doing it for a reason. Like, you're choosing to continue to do it. So that, like, that's a habitual sin. That's just, if I struggle with whatever that struggle is, but I continue to choose to do that, right?
Right.
You've said it. I heard you say in Fight Club years ago, of don't tell me you're struggling with sin if you're just continuing to do it. There's no struggle there. You're just
There's
sitting.
no struggle.
You're not trying to stop.
There's no struggle.
You're just sitting in it.
That's like pounding the Doritos and going, I'm trying to lose weight.
Yeah.
It's like,
and
no,
and it
no,
seems
you're
to me
not.
that's what he's saying is like, no, if you're struggling with the sin is far different than I'm just going to sin.
Right.
Right.
It may not be a struggle. It may at some point have become a lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. And sin, it's incompatible with God's law. It's incompatible with what God is calling us to.
Right.
So if we're choosing to stay there, if we're making that choice to just remain in that sin, we're making a choice to remain outside of God.
Right. I have no qualm with that. In fact, I think this speaks directly to the point of two big doctrine words. The first one is justification. The second one is sanctification. Justification is when by faith I receive Christ and I receive forgiveness of sins and I am declared righteous.
Innocent, yeah.
I'm declared innocent. I'm righteous. I'm a child of God.
Yeah.
But then there's this other doctrine, the doctrine of sanctification. They're not the same thing. Sanctification is the process by which God is making me right.
The purification.
And what I believe is that you can't separate those two. So the person that says, I'm really, really interested in God's justification, being made right, being declared righteous. That's what we mean when we say when God looks at you, he sees Jesus, is because by faith you've received Christ and his forgiveness, and you've been made a child. But if you're interested in justification, but you're not interested in sanctification, so it's almost like justification is being made right with God, and sanctification is the process of being made right by God. One is position, one is a process. If you're not interested in sanctification, were you ever justified in the first place? Right? Because I think Avie, for example, to going back to my granddaughter, because she's on my mind, I really think she wants to please you.
Yeah.
She does. Now, she's wrestling with wanting to please her. She's also just turned 2, right? And so she's still an infant and still trying to figure it out. We were, super excited yesterday because someone wanted to sit on the potty, right? So, I mean, think about that. And I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about her, just to clarify that, right?
Thanks.
She's in the process of growing and learning, and I think she wants to please her mom and dad. She wants to do that. She doesn't quite know how yet because she's in that wrestling match.
Well, and to what you were just talking about, the justification, God did that. Sanctification requires we have to
requires our participation.
We have to participate in that.
Yeah. I was thinking about this, and let me bounce it off you guys. I'll just call this sermon prep. Both justification and sanctification. So the justification, receiving Christ by faith. Sanctification, I'm going to make Calvinists mad here, like hyper-Calvinists. Don't they both require my yes? Isn't it safe to say, to be justified, that's saying yes to Jesus?
I would say, in a way, because you need, I'm thinking of a courtroom.
Yeah.
You have to okay him to represent you.
There you go.
To be the one the one who goes before the judge.
The advocate. Yeah, the mediator, the lawyer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could represent myself, but
it's not going to go well.
No.
Yeah.
So I in that way, in that analogy, that's kind of how I would think. It would require me to want him to represent me.
Right.
So.
And then how in sanctification does it also require my yes? Because I can't sanctify me. I mean, we're not proposing a works-based righteousness here. But you said it first. You said that sanctification requires my participation. So isn't that me also giving God my yes? And I'm saying, yes, I will participate in this, and I will say yes to you and no to sin. Yeah.
Well, not to exhaust the toddler analogy, but in order for my daughter to grow, she has to participate in that. Like if she wants to be if she's going to be potty trained eventually, I can't. If you force you can't force kids to do things. We can try, but it always goes poorly, and then they end up never wanting to do whatever it is again. I just mean for big growth to happen, the child has to be I want to do this, whatever it is. I want to learn how to tie my shoes, or
or swim to the ladder when she's with Darcy in the pool.
She could tell me no. She could say no, I don't want to do this, and she could and she does sometimes, and then it's okay, well, we'll learn that later. Right. Not right now, but later,
And the really cool thing is because I was fascinated by this when she jumped in we have a redneck above ground pool, but it is over her head. And because my wife and my oldest daughter, they are astute grandparent, is the first thing that this child needs to learn is how to swim to the ladder. And she's still using the floaty. Let's not get too excited. She's not going to the Olympics yet. But even with the floaty, she's got to figure out how to get to the ladder. And so she, showed me how she jumped in the water. She's swimming to the ladder. Avie wanted to do that again and again and again and again and again. And going back to what we're talking about, the practice of righteousness versus the practice of lawlessness. Yeah. That pleased her mother and pleased her grandmother and her grandfather, that she likes to swim to the ladder. And she was, hey, this is kind of fun. And so she was doing it again and again and again. Now, there's bad habits she can learn in the pool, too. She hasn't learned those yet. If she practices those again.
The water.
What's that?
Like trying to drink the water.
Exactly, yeah. But the practice of righteousness required her participation. And she's getting better and better and better at it. So hopefully, eventually, we can trust her to be around the pool, that if something bad happens, no adults around, she falls in the pool, she can get herself to the ladder. That's what we're trying to do. So that's verse 6 and 7. You got any more thoughts on that? 6, no one who keeps on sinning has either seen him or known him. This kind of goes back to that idea that that I was first presenting. If you're not interested in the sanctification, have you really been justified? So like if you've never really experienced Jesus Christ and seen your own sin compared to his righteousness and your need for a Savior, it seems like what John is saying here is he's backing up my idea. No one who abides in him keeps on sinning. No one who keeps on sinning has either seen him or known him. Mm-hmm. I think you can't have the justification without at least the desire for the sanctification, right? So the sanctification, making me more and more and more like Jesus, more and more and more righteous, the closer and closer I get to the day when God takes me home. I got to at least be interested in that to some level. Like, I don't want to be a legalist that says, hey, you know what, Adam? You know, you should be further along than you are, right? That's me shooting on you, and that's the door to legalism. But when he's talking about the practice here, doesn't it seem to say at least you should have an interest in that? Or am I totally being judgy?
No, I think I agree with you 100%. I think when I asked, like, if we were to live in the confidence of his love, living in the reality of what Jesus did for us, like it brings forth this understanding of my own wickedness, right? When we begin to know God more than he reveals it into us of our own wickedness. And when we see that and we understand how perfect God is and how much our sin hurts God and separates us from him, that should give us that desire to not want to stay there, right?
Right.
And so then as verse 3 says it, to purify myself. So
right.
I'm making that effort. I don't want to hurt God any more than I already have. I don't want to continue sinning and separating myself from him more, right?
Right.
And so I think you're right on. I think if there's no desire in your heart to be more like him or to not sin against him, to not obey him,
are you really saved? Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you really saved?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's like we should love God more than anything, knowing what he's done for us. I don't want to hurt my wife or my kids. So how much more so should I not want to hurt God? And if I know that's what my sin does, right? Because God, he doesn't want me to sin.
Right.
And so, I don't know, maybe this is off on a weird tangent.
No,
but
this is a good tangent. This is a good tangent.
It's just kind of where my brain goes when I understand my own wickedness and what it does, then man, that should really make me not want to stay there.
Right.
And then that begins that process of, I'm not going to be perfect. I'm still going to mess up. But the desire of my heart is to be more like him, is to be obedient to him. And so I have to put in effort. There's a job for me to do, and that's to put in the effort to not remain there,
right? To
not be that habitual sinner.
And the opportunity is to love him.
Mm.
It actually reminded me of a story that Joe Kelly told me from his own life. And he was talking about relationships. And I'm glad you used the term, when I realized that my sin has hurt God. Now, it doesn't mean you can't physically hurt God, but we can grieve the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit is God. And so that's what you mean. It's like we can grieve God, right? So he was talking about his daughter had this cabinet, this antique, like some sort of a dresser or a cabinet, and she put it right by the front door to her house, inside the front door. And I've never been to the house, so I don't know the exact description. But it was the perfect place when you walked into someone's house. I assume it's a house somewhere in Traverse City or wherever, where you would set your keys down, or whatever you had, you'd set your keys down. Well, she'd worked really hard to refinish it. And keys by her father or her mother or her brother or whoever was coming, that constantly get dropped there when they came over to their house, would always damage the finish. And so she had to refinish it. And she was kind of frustrated and was telling people, please don't set your keys. Just don't drop your keys on top of that thing. Now, that may seem irrelevant to me or you. That's not the point. The point was, He says she worked very hard, not once, but twice, to refinish his cabinet, and people continued to set their keys there. And then it dawned on him one day. He was like, she's asked me not to do it. She's told me why. She's explained how it hurts her, and she wants this cabinet to look nice. And he made this statement. He said, if I continue to do that after she's asked me multiple times and explain why that's bad, she goes, now it becomes abuse. I'm abusing my relationship with her. I'm saying, I don't care about you. I don't care about your cabinet. I'm just going to drop these keys wherever I want to, even if it causes damage to the finish. And so if that's true of our our human relationships, and oh, by the way, Tab listener, that might have just saved your marriage, because there's things that are important to your husband or important to your wife that you're like, well, he should just get over that. Or, well, you know what? She shouldn't make that such a big deal. Or that's an irrelevant fear or what have you. Yeah, but if you continue to do it, even though that person has said, when you do that, that hurts me or that makes me afraid, now you've become an abuser, regardless of what the thing is. Regardless of what the thing is. Well, how much more so in our relationship with God, which is what he's speaking to right here. I don't know, Belle, did you have a thought with that?
I was just thinking, kind of off of what Adam was saying, if our focus is on what God did for us, then that should make you want to come to God regardless of what sin is there. I don't know. I was just thinking about this recently because when you are convicted of sin, if you're in that legalism, like you were talking about, it can make you want to go away farther from God. Kind of like, I should know this better, or I should know better. And when that's your focus, except for what he said at the beginning, that if we remember that we're, children of God, then it's, I'm trying to remember, didn't you post something on Facebook recently about the kid who's in trouble, and if it's a scary parent, the kid doesn't want to, I don't want to, I think
it was,
don't tell my dad or whatever, but then if
it said I messed up, my dad's going to kill me.
Yeah, versus
I mess up, I need to call my dad.
And that should be the, I don't know. I was just thinking about that in regards to this, because just where our perspective is changes that whole idea. Yeah.
Is my perspective focus on not sinning, or is my perspective focus on pleasing God? There is a difference, right? One, you feel like you're walking a tightrope. The other one, you feel like you're walking in freedom.
Yeah.
At least to me, right? When I want to please my Father, when I want to please someone, it's like the possibilities are endless that I can do. But when I'm walking that tightrope, it's like, whatever you do, don't, look at them sideways. Whatever you do, don't say that one word, or don't bring up that one awkward thing. Is that what you're kind of driving at just a little bit there as far as the perspective goes?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so verse 8, he says, whoever makes a practice of sinning is of the devil, for the devil has been sinning from the beginning. The reason the Son of God appeared was to destroy the works of the devil. No one born of God makes a practice of sinning, for God's seed abides in him, and he cannot keep on sinning because he has been born of God. It's saying the same thing in a different way. By this, verse 10, it is evident who are the children of God and who are the children of the devil. Whoever does not practice righteousness is not of God, nor is the one who does not love his brother. So I love the fact that he brings righteousness back to love, but I still got justification and sanctification rolling around in my head. And there was something when he says in verse 8, the reason the Son of God appeared was to destroy the works of the devil. And with this justification and sanctification, he does it in two ways. Justification, or salvation, that is when God in Christ destroyed the power of sin to dominate me and to be under its punishment and penalty. So it destroyed the power of sin. Sanctification eradicates the presence of sin in my life. And so I'm no longer under the penalty because of the work of Jesus Christ. But this process of sin being beaten out of me, weaned out of me, wrung out of me, fumigated out of me. I'm trying to, hey, come on, give me some more words. We could get fumigated. We could get eradicated. We could get profligated. I don't know. I'm making up words now. That's the process of sanctification. And that's why I keep coming back to, if I'm a child of God, at least my desire is for that process to happen at some level.
Mm-hmm.
You got some notes or something highlighted there.
I was just highlighting the verses.
In verse 8 here, it says, the reason the Son of God appeared restates verse 5, but here it specifies the connection of sin to the devil. Knowing Christ means becoming involved in an all-out war against the works of the devil, that is, the practice of sinning. So, Belle, give us a practical example from your life.
Oh, my gosh.
Sorry, that's exactly why you didn't want to come on this podcast.
No, I mean, like, what do you, can you...
Just like sin, just like sin in your life, just something your parents didn't know about that you had to eradicate.
Oh my goodness, no.
No, we're not doing this on this podcast.
I don't know. This isn't that specific, but I was just thinking, like at the beginning of this relationship, the types of sin you're gonna see, what they are, and they're obvious.
Yeah.
And then I was just thinking, like, if you were digging and you're finding little rocks in there, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I didn't know that was in there, and that's just kind of what, I don't know. I'm walking through that similarly. You're just you're just digging, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I didn't even know that was in there. I didn't know I was struggling with that, but that makes sense why all these problems are popping up. And but yeah, you have to look, like, you have to say, like David, like, search me, God, and know, like, make it known to me, whatever it is
right.
that's happening here. So
check it out. So all the men on our staff, most of the men, took the opportunity to go to the Basics Conference down in Cleveland at Parkside Church. And I believe our opening talk was Colin Smith, who's also a Scotsman. Mm-hmm. And he's a pastor of a church called The Orchard in Chicago, an evangelical free church, by the way.
Yeah.
And his first address to a room full of pastors was on the trap of spiritual pride. Spiritual pride, yeah. Right? And I was like, okay. No thought in my mind, which is obviously now I see a symptom of spiritual pride, that I'm going to need this talk.
Yeah.
But I'm here, and it's like, okay, maybe this, maybe I'll get something out of this. This will be kind of good, and, I'm ready to take notes, and we're there with all the boys ready to take notes. And he listed the symptoms and the cures for spiritual pride. I'm glad I took notes on the cures because I couldn't get over. There were like 8 symptoms or 7. I don't remember what it was.
There were 7.
There were like 7 different indicators of spiritual pride. I'm pretty sure I'm guilty of at least 6. And if I'm guilty of 6, I'm probably guilty of 7. I'm just too proud to admit it. Like I was 6 for 7 and just found myself, remember at the end when we all stood up, I'm like, oh man, we just got here. I just got kicked in the batteries.
Yeah.
But I felt like dude after dude after dude on our staff was like, oh man. And it was what you're talking about is, hey, I think I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm a pastor.
Yep.
I'm such an accomplished pastor that I'm at Alistair Begg's conference to become even a better pastor. We're going back to basics because it's Bible and basics is so important and Bible's so important and a Scottish accent. And then the very first thing, spiritual pride, guilty,
yep.
guilty, 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 guilty. And it was those rocks you were talking about. It's like, I think I'm doing good. Yeah.
And I didn't even hear that talk, but that's exactly what has been kind of going on with me the last 4 years. And I think anyone who's just been a Christian for a while can relate to that. Where you get to a point where you just think, I know that. I don't need to dive into that. I already read that chapter or that whatever.
I heard that sermon. I've been to that conference. Yeah.
Yeah. And so a few years ago, that happened with me when I wasn't reading my Bible. And I think growing up in the church, there's the people who say you have to read every single day. And so I was of the generation where we went in the opposite direction, which was a little bit of it was good, the getting rid of the legalism part. You don't have to read every day. Doesn't have to be in the morning. But then it just becomes, it's okay to not. And no one ever really said that, but that's kind of what happened because no one really reads their Bible, at least in my generation. And I was actually listening to a podcast where this old couple was just talking about how every day they do quiet time and, just like words like that make me roll my eyes and get like annoyed, or used to. People who said, oh, I didn't do my devotional today. And I would get, it was almost like,
oh, gag.
And what it was conviction in me knowing I don't, it was the pride of, well, I don't have to do that, or you've got it wrong. And so anyway, when I just bucked up and decided I'm going to do this every day for a while, and I don't do it perfect at all, but when I was actually digging, when I was reading, that's when I was like, oh, I don't do that well. I need to practice that better. And I never would have found those rocks if I hadn't dug,
And what are you, 26? You 26? I should know this. He's my child. Yeah. 26. I was talking to a dude that's got to be at least 76. So however much older that is, right? And he was telling me the exact same story, that he'd kind of fallen into a trap of, he said, when I first became a Christian, I used to read the Bible every day, first thing in the morning. And then he kind of got out of that practice, and it doesn't have to be in the morning. He was kind of going at night. And again, I'm not being a legalist. I agree with that 100%. But he shared almost the exact same testimony of all of a sudden it'd been, listen, I've spent 40 years following Jesus because he came to faith in his 30s. And here I am in the last couple of years of, since pandemic, he just gotten into really bad habits of being grumpy and tired, probably had a bad back like me, drinking coffee in the morning, then just going about his day and wondering what is it that he was missing.
Yeah.
And suddenly it was like a light bulb went in his head. He wasn't seeking God through his word. I think it says in the Psalms, I will seek you in the morning.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you have to do Bible reading and prayer time in the morning. That's not what it means. But for David, he did. And for this guy, it was the identical thing. And he said, it sounds so stupid, but he goes, for the last 6 months, he goes, I've never missed a morning with coffee, my Bible, even if it's 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And he said, everything in my life my entire perspective has changed. I care about people again. I care about God again. I care about church again. I care about becoming more and more like Christ again.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm so stupid. He's like, it was one of these duh moments, that he had just kind of gotten out of that habit. So you're not saying, hey, let's be legalistic about it. You're saying for you, that's something that really, really worked is here it's available. Let's get after it.
Yeah, especially because I'm an emotion driven. So when I'm not feeling connected to God, I'm like, why don't I feel you? And so it was like years of just wondering why God wasn't speaking to me and realizing that he already did. He spoke to me a lot, actually, and it's just right here, and I just have to read it. So,
why don't you speak to me? I've got this big giant letter that I wrote you that you haven't read.
Yep.
Adam, you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I think
I'm glad you said yeah, because if you'd went no, then it'd be like, wow.
Yeah, that's awkward.
Yeah.
No, I think God reveals things to us in his time, and he remembers that I am but dust, and that I probably couldn't handle all the things that he's going to reveal to me at once. And so he gives it to me in
little doses, little small doses that Adam can, little bite-sized chunks,
very small doses,
little nuggets.
Adam
Are they kids' nuggets or are they like chicken strips?
Dinosaur nuggets.
Probably chicken strips because
like
I'm
dinosaur
jacked up. Yeah. But I thought it was interesting too when you were telling the story of that gentleman and he said all the things in my life I suddenly had a different perspective on. It wasn't that all the things in his life suddenly got better, right? It doesn't just mean that life is just, well, if you do these things, then life is just going to be good and easy. No, but it can change our perspective on those things.
Yeah.
And it can change how we deal with life and how much life affects us. It just stuck out to me because I think that can, when we remember that, it's changing our perspective. It's not necessarily going to change the circumstances. That's important.
Yeah.
So it's not like a magic,
Yeah, it's not
It's not like a magic spell
the
or
pray
something
harder
like that.
movement. You know,
Right.
if you're not, maybe you're just not praying hard enough, or you're not reading your Bible enough, or you're not doing this enough, and that's why things aren't changing for you.
Yeah.
That's not it at all.
For me, it didn't make my life easier. That didn't change, but it made abiding in Jesus easier.
Yeah.
Like back to the compass thing. If you don't look at the needle, you're not going to know where north is at all.
Yeah.
So for me, it was the Bible is the needle.
It
like
can
you
make
have
getting through life easier.
Yes.
But not necessarily going to change the circumstances in life.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a famous scripture verse. I'm looking for it right here. The one that talks about delighting in the Lord. Psalm 37 verse 4. I'm looking at it right now in the NL or the ESV. So Psalm 37 says, "Fret not yourself because of evildoers. Be not envious of wrongdoers, for they will soon fade like the grass and wither like the green herb. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and befriend faithfulness." And then here's the famous one. "Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act. He will bring forth your righteousness as the light and your justice as the noonday." Years ago, when Isabel was little, and I think it was before Benjamin was even born, I found myself preaching at a spiritual emphasis week at a Christian school in Puerto Rico. And the chaplain of that school, she was a force of nature. She was probably twice my age, Puerto Rican lady, but she was just into these students and into the Lord and into his word. And she was sharing with me between two of our sessions the struggle that was in her life. And it had to do with the struggle with her children of not following the Lord, even though they've got this awesome, dynamite, godly mother who'd raised them in the fear of the Lord. There was some health stuff with her husband. It was, without going into all the details, she was just like, "Where are you, God?" And I'm seeking God. And she had been claiming this as a promise. Verse 4, Psalm 37:4, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart." And so she took that as the delighting yourself, like she was fixated on the desires of her heart, that her children would follow Jesus, that her big plans for the children of the school, the students in this high school, that they would get it, and that it would be more than just a surface faith, that her husband's physical issues, all these things. It's like, God, I'm delighting in you. And she thought she was delighting herself in the Lord, but she was focusing really on her desires and not in delighting. Mm-hmm. She was all focused on the desires of her heart, and it was almost like she was giving God whatever quote unquote delight that she thought her works or her righteous acts were, still kind of hoping for the desires to come true. And she told me, she said, I realized about, through tears that I'd had it backwards the whole time, is that the focus wasn't in my desires. The focus needed to be in the delight, is delighting in his will, his way, his purpose. And it was me how did she say it? It was something like, it's me conforming my desires to his desires and delight in that, regardless of whether he gave me what my desires had been before I conformed to him. Does that make sense? I mean, it's similar to is God going to bend to my shape, or am I going to bend to his shape?
Yeah.
Is God going to bend his purpose to my will, or am I going to bend my purpose to his will? And so the whole thing was she was trying to, she was like, I was delighting with all my might, or trying to, but she realized it was just all effort. Mm-hmm. And that's not what the true meaning of the delight was. I don't know. Thoughts about that? Or you got nothing? Am I just staring out into space there? It's like, okay, John, that was nice, Puerto Rican lady.
It was a great story. No.
Yeah, whatever. It wasn't even.
Yeah, I guess anytime I've looked at that as it's like looking at that verse, it's the desires of my heart change when I begin to seek God. right? And so my desires 5 years ago were incredibly different than what they are now.
I'd say so.
My
Yeah.
perspective has changed on life and just on relationships and whatever. And so, but also having to recognize the desires of my heart may not be what God's will is either. And so, but then delighting in that, being okay with that, but delighting knowing that God knows better than I do. And so,
Oh, that's hard for us to do because we have to let go of control.
yeah, yeah, that's true. But there's a freedom in it too, right? There's a freedom in letting go of that control and going, okay, I know that you know better. So there's delightment in knowing that I'm good. Whatever
Right.
you say goes, and that's what is best for me because you know best for me and I don't.
Right.
Like there's a peace that comes with that. And that's how I think, and this is just the way my brain works. So you guys are just getting a peek inside my head of like, that's
Scary.
how I can,
Scary to think about.
that's how I delight in the Lord. And he gives me the desires of my heart that those desires change and I can be happy about that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I probably said a lot of words to not make any sense at all, but it
No,
makes
but
sense
this
in
is
my
John.
head.
This is all of John's stuff. Is John thinks on this spiritual, ethereal kind of like, plane. Sorry, I'm not talking about this John. I'm talking about the John that wrote 1st, 2nd,
Right.
and 3rd John. Is he loves this stuff, right? Which is why he ends here with it is evident who are the children of God and who are the children of the devil. Is one's gonna, and he's been making this point, is that children of God are going to want to practice righteousness. Their compass is going to point there. They're going to have a desire to be more and more like Christ. And those who do not practice righteousness, they're obviously the children of devil. There's no in between.
Mm-mm.
There's no like, yeah, but he was a good person. It's either you're a child of God or you're a child of the devil. But then he does this hard right turn right at the end. He says, in context, by this it's evident who are the children of God and who are the children of the devil. Whoever does not practice righteousness is not of God, nor is the one who does not love his brother. What does that have to do with righteousness? He brings it back to this barometer. And here is a note. It says, when it says does not love his brother, John returns to the ethical dimension, the true barometer of what people really believe, whatever they may say. And this comes back to, our mission statement here at the church is to love God and to love people. And so the righteousness he's talking about is not just kind of like these soft good works. He's talking about choosing to love, choosing to love my brother in my heart. This is the righteousness that comes from God. And so if I love God, I'm going to want to love my brother with all that entails, forgiveness, blessing him, seeing what's best for him, being patient, being long-suffering, and what have you. But it's just interesting to me that what we think of religious righteousness isn't that at all. He brings it back to love. Yeah. Oh, and whoever doesn't love his brother, yeah, you're also a child of the devil. Yeah, what do you think about that? Either one of you.
I think it's easy to love those that you agree with or that treat you the way you feel like you want to be treated. And so, because again, he was writing this at a time where there was a lot of false teachers. There were people teaching against what Jesus taught. And those people were not showing love at all. And so I think it was also a way for him to go, look, how can you know if this is the real gospel? How can you know if this is true? Is there love in it? And so I think about that with whether it's different denominations or whatever, like it's very easy for us I can love you guys if we believe the same things, if we're on board with the exact same stuff, if all of the same rules are followed. But am I going to love you if maybe one of us is Calvinist and one of us is not? I had to bring it in.
Yeah,
Isabel.
yeah. She had to bring it in. Yeah.
Right. Am I still going to love you through that?
Or if you have a different view on baptism, or a different view on Bible translations, ESV versus CBD Bible. Yeah.
Yeah, that's CSB.
Or how to raise kids, or politics.
Yeah. On whatever, am I still showing you love? Because if I'm not, that's a pretty good test to whether I'm really following Jesus and loving Jesus or not. Is am I loving others no matter what? If I'm not, how can I say I'm loving God?
You just made me think of something that is just so crazy because it goes back to this theme. I mean, think about this for a second. The theme that it says anyone born of God is a child of God, and anyone not born of God is a child of the devil. You're not a child of God. And the very first thing that he gave us there was that the reason the world does not know us is that it did not know him. Beloved, we are God's children now, and what we will be has not yet appeared. In Canada, and now in the United States, there is a big push against a certain kind of speech or a certain kind of crime. And it's the opposite of love. You can get in trouble for what's known as hate speech or what's called a hate crime. So in other words, if I murder someone because I want their money, that's not as bad in the eyes of the law as if I murder someone because I don't like the color or because I hate them. Like I hate the color of their skin, I hate their lifestyle, I hate their religion. If they can call it a hate crime, so it's more than just a murder. This was a hate crime. How much further can you go than murder with a person, right?
Yeah.
Oh man, it would have been better if he'd have been nice about the murder. But no, he was hateful as he murdered, right? What I'm pointing to is, and by the way, I am not diminishing anyone who has suffered, because of any kind of crime. But it's interesting that the world is trying to put a category of sin because intuitively we know that the highest law is love. And so as of yet, there is no law that says I must love everyone. I must love every race. I must love people that have different political backgrounds as me. I must love people that have different sexual preferences than I do, right? But we have made it a crime to hate them. Now, I don't hate any of those people, to be clear.
Well, they confuse the word hate with accepting the action of,
There you go. Yeah. Which is at the foundation of it.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm saying is that law that Paul says in Romans 1 is written on our heart. We know that hate is sin. We know that hate is sin.
Mm-hmm.
So we're writing into the most extreme parts of the criminal law books or whatever on what is a crime, that this was not just a crime, this was a hate-filled crime.
Mm-hmm.
Where does that come from? From an establishment that doesn't believe in God.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't believe in a God who identifies as love within the Bible. He identifies as a Father and the Son and the Spirit, but it says that God is love.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've made it a crime because we know intuitively in our hearts that it's hate that's what's killing us, but we don't want to go to love. We don't want to say, hey, listen.
So we don't want to go to God's love. Yeah.
Good correction. Yeah. We don't want to go to, I don't know, when you were talking, that just made me think about that. Sorry, you two, I feel like after I make a point, you just kind of look at me like, he's an idiot. He's really losing his mind here. Or maybe both of you are like, he said it perfectly. Which is it, Adam?
It was perfect.
Whatever. Stop.
It's perfect.
Whatever. Say what you really think.
No, I mean, Benji just gave me a look.
That just means that our time's about up. That's all that
time's
means.
up.
Or
okay.
It could mean that he's hungry. Maybe not.
No.
I'm not sure.
Right.
So, Isabel, do you realize that you are the third member of our family to have your voice heard on this podcast?
No, I had no idea. I don't actually listen to this podcast.
Whoa. We might have to just go.
Not because I don't want to. I just haven't.
You have
hilarious.
Not a single episode ever?
I started one that was 3 hours long, and I got about 20 minutes in, and then my drive was over, and I just haven't.
You didn't just press play again?
No.
Wow.
Sorry.
What a great commercial for the Tabernacle podcast, right?
That is hilarious.
Britton Bishop, I hope you're listening. He's probably not. But if Britton is listening, he'll be devastated.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you recommend our podcast to anybody?
I mean, sure, yeah. I recommend
Even though you don't listen.
the people who are on it. So.
You recommend the people who are on
Yeah.
it, but she just... Do you listen to the podcast?
Yeah.
Oh, he listens to the podcast.
Sorry.
Belle, wow.
I will
That's rough.
eventually.
No, probably not.
Benji, you listen to all of them.
No, I don't.
You listen to every single one.
Whoever's talking, I push a button.
Yeah, but you're here for the recording. That's why I don't listen to them. Actually, I have listened to some that I haven't been on. If I'm out of town or something like that, I want to hear a cool testimony. But Well, Isabel's a straight shooter. She's not going to sit here and lie just to make her dad feel better.
Yeah.
Can you explain? You have 3 Bibles open. So I see you got your study Bible, and then you've got a translation open on your phone. What is that thing?
Oh, this was we had in young adults ministry, we had someone got us the CSB journal just for first, second, and third John, because that's what we were going through.
So that's like a single book of the Bible?
Yeah, it's just, and then the Bible's on one side, and then
that's
there's
a good
notes
idea.
on the other side for, but I'm actually not a fan of this translation, so that's why I have 2 other things.
What is the translation?
This is the CSB.
Ooh, there she goes. Yeah.
Well, I
That's
just mean in like certain verses, like what we were reading earlier, like in this version, it says, everyone who remains in him does not sin.
Okay.
So this is like the blunted, this is
Yeah.
I would say the most basic, but then when you read it in what I think a more accurate translation, that's when you see the keeps on sinning, continually
cannot keep
sinning.
on sinning. Yeah.
So
There's a different implication there.
it's good for
Because if I
some
sinned, I
things.
think I'm no longer a child of God if I read it.
NASB says it more closely
Exactly.
to the CSB.
That's the one I like. Yeah.
Yeah, but you said you don't like it. Because mine is NASB, and it says it way more closely to the CSB.
Oh, we're going to fight about Bible translations now.
I'm just saying. I mean, is
What have
is
you?
NASB, isn't that supposed to be the most closely word-for-word translation?
That's the one I have here too.
Yeah, it's supposed
Okay.
to be. But word for word, if you've ever read a different
Yeah.
language, is
It's
not.
very difficult.
It's very difficult
Yeah.
because different languages put the words in different orders, and sometimes when you put them in the
Yeah.
order that they came in, you're like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah.
And so,
yeah.
you
But
have
I
to
have
an
3
understanding
open
of that.
because what's good for me is when I get confused,
Yes,
read a different translation.
Mhm.
'cause-
there's a golden nugget
Yeah.
right there from
Perfect.
Isabel Crawford.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's why I love to read the ESV. I love to
Yeah.
have the NLT close
Mhm.
by. I got some study notes.
Yeah.
I've been known to preach from a
Yeah.
CSB, so
I know.
I don't want you to think that I'm a hater.
No, I don't hate it
It's
either.
okay.
Just when in young adults, when the women split off and we were talking about this, that was one of the things we were, someone had the courage to say, well, then why does it say that? If
Yes.
it doesn't mean that, then why does it say that? And I said, well, it does say it in different ways. And so when that's why I like the NASB, because it's exactly what it's how, even though it gets confusing.
Yeah.
But when you read it there, that's when, so I think that can be helpful too.
Which is why I like the NLT, because
Yeah.
it just puts it in American. And sometimes that's what we needed.
Did you say NALT? What is
NLT.
Oh, okay.
New Living Translation. New Living Translation. So when does Britain
Sweet.
come back?
I don't know.
We might need his big noggin in these headphones sooner rather than later.
Mhm.
Sooner rather than later because we miss him. But this was awesome having you on here. Isabel, was it painful? Was it the worst?
Just a little bit, but
It was painful? What was the worst part of it?
it's minorly painful.
Just would you be on this podcast again?
I don't know, maybe.
Maybe. Would you share your life story on this podcast again?
Oh, I don't know, maybe.
How long have you been working at this church in an official capacity in Tap Kids?
Like 1 month.
Like 1 month.
Yeah.
Do you regret your decision?
No.
For clarity,
Mhm.
did I make you do this?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
No, I don't work
Yeah.
for you.
Ooh, I like that. Who do you work for?
I don't know.
You work for Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your direct report is
Martin Rizzi.
Martin Rizzi.
Yeah.
Okay, so you work for Jesus and then Martin.
Mhm.
But that's not like Jesus and then Martin. It's like Jesus and then Martin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Way down there.
That was a short joke, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was a no. Oh, now I'm in trouble with Rizzi, and he's got a black belt. Yeah.
All right.
So,
well,
and how long you been working here?
actually on staff, or
Yeah.
you mean the time
Yeah.
you guys told me
Yeah.
I would temporarily take over Foundry, and then that lasted for like a year and a half.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
That was a test.
After that, it's been about a year and a half.
There's some barbs in there. It's been a year and a half.
Yeah.
Are you regretting the decision yet?
No.
You're not. Okay.
No.
Well, that's
All right.
good to know.
How long has it been for you?
It will be 20 years this November.
How many times have you regretted that decision?
Not regretted it. Wondered.
Yeah.
Wondered. Like at the time, I might have thought it was regret, but I was like, man, am I still here? What am I doing? Now there's nothing else I want to do. Like I want to stay. It's been awesome. I love this church. I love the people. I love just seeing what God does after being obedient for a long time in the same thing. I think that's something you've started to experience and will experience as teenagers graduate and come back, and you kind of see them. It's funny. Some of them will start to think like, or you may start to think, it's like, man, did they hear anything I said? But then the ones that kind of keep that compass pointed north, you know, you get to celebrate with them. And then some of those people that maybe kind of lost the compass heading, when you can be there when they come back, that's always awesome, you know. And I've seen that over and over and over again. I'm thinking about a guy right now who was at our Man Up camp, and I couldn't believe it. I'm like, man, I didn't even know you were back a part of church. You know, in fact, because we were partnering with another church, we were partnering with Bayview. I'm like, did you go to Bayview? He goes, no, I've been back at the Tab for about the last month. And
cool.
And he started talking about the different changes he was making in his life. And that's been a couple months, and the guy's still here, and he's got a big smile every time. And it was all these things about resetting his compass back to true north, because he's truly a child of God. And he just took a long detour, he and his wife both. And so it's cool to see that. I guess I kind of love that. So we got any shout outs? Isabel, do you love brats?
Yep.
What kind of brats? Do you got a favorite brat? I know
All
you
of
love
them.
meat. You're a great cook. I love when you come to our house because you're always cooking. My favorite thing's meat and rice. There's always some kind of dish that has both meat and rice that are involved.
Yep.
So apparently we get brats, like we being the podcast, but Brittany eats them all. Like they've never made it here. Like they have never made it to Buckley. I've heard about a bacon brat, a blueberry brat. I didn't know there was such a thing as a blueberry brat, some sort of blueberry thing in there. Have you gotten some of these? Is it like you and the stepbrothers kind of kept this little deal?
He's hogging it all.
He's hogging every bit of that. Well, if you make brats and you're listening, you need to circumvent Britain as a dealer.
Yeah.
He can't be trusted.
He cannot be trusted.
Because they're either going to him in the campus or just he in Hope's house. I'm fairly certain.
We'll have to ask Hope if he's even telling her.
Oh, you think he's...
He might just be keeping it all for himself.
I think he lives in a little bit of fear right there.
Oh,
like, I think she might have just a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit more pull than we want to give her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. All right. Well, shout out to Bigby.
Yeah. Oh, you got a Bigby
like,
coffee?
It's like, yeah. Big.
Are you a Bigby coffee fan?
Yeah.
What's your thinking?
Did you know Bigby actually just sponsored the entire women's retreat? They brought coffee out to the women's retreat. Yeah, they did.
Wait, sponsor? When you say sponsored
coffee at the women's retreat,
you should have.
Nope.
They did. Samantha reached out to them, and they got back with her and said, "Hey, the owner, I can't remember her name. Samantha knows her name, but just said, yeah, we feel like we're supposed to just sponsor you guys." And so they brought the coffee out and made it and all that stuff for the women's retreat.
But you didn't get in,
which is pretty cool.
It might have been the day that I left.
Because you had to come back to Tab Kids? Yeah. Or is Samantha keeping all that Bigby coffee for herself?
Maybe.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
So thanks, Bigby Coffee.
Yeah.
Sorry, when you said sponsored the whole women's retreat, I'm like, well, then why do we get a bill from Lake Ann?
I meant like they just brought coffee out.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. No,
they provided the coffee for them.
That's actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if coffee goes with brats, but that actually was not even a shout out. That was just a thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. So, hey, you can go offer some support to Bigby Coffee if you're not eating the goddess coffee of Starbucks or whatever that's supposed to be. Somebody told me that little emblem is a goddess, and they were
It's
like,
a siren.
"Ooh, it's a siren." Benji speaks. Isn't that some sort of mythological?
Doesn't
creature?
matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Whatever. Well, I know some people that are like, no Christian should ever buy from Starbucks because they have a siren on there, whatever. And I'm just like, I just need the caffeine, man. I'm not trying to make any, whatever. But all right. Well, that's a good place to stop. We've successfully done a podcast without Britain. Benji, got anything to add besides the siren? Thank you for that, by the way. I didn't know it was a siren. I thought it was some sort of green goddess. Not sure. So, all right. Well, until next time, if Britain comes back from Florida alive, this is Adam, Isabel, Benji, and John signing off.